if I can figure out how to have tools, make it a lot more efficient for me in terms of how I'm doing work and all the rest, that's a good thing. I use a phone for that. I use computers for that. I'm happy to be lazy in any context that I possibly can be. I think that's one of the origins of intelligence, frankly, as long as it's done with care. If you say, well, look, why am I using this? It's so that I can actually accomplish more in ways that matter for people. That's, I think, the general use of everything from Reid AI down to synthetic voices.
Hi, Reid.
Hi, Jeff.
We are getting together just days after you released kind of a mind-blowing video of you interviewing an AI version of yourself and that AI version of yourself interviewing you. I'm curious how the idea for that came about and how you achieved it technically.
So the idea was, obviously, most of the time that people have been talking about, kind of digital twins or images, most of that discussion has been in the classic for today and AI and everything else, in the fear and, oh my God, it's going to be the end of Hollywood and all this disaster and storm is coming. And, it's not to underplay any of the concerns and to navigate the concerns, but I think that almost for sure, just like every other epoch of technological development in human history, is we're going to have a lot of, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. And then in a few years, it'll be like, oh my God, that's really great. And there's all this new stuff and there's a new place of humanity. And so I'm trying to help us through that curve. That's the very broad thing, by seeing some of the positive. And so I said, okay, look, we've clearly got this stuff commercially available now. You can do this, anyone, not just Reid Hoffman, anyone could do this today to make this happen. And then to start exploring what some of the positive use cases are. And, was to try to do it without being Pollyannish. So we definitely both steered into some of the controversial topics, but also, did some things that, caused some people to go, oh my God, that's creepy, because it's new and different. But also to address questions like, why are you doing this? And, what interesting things might come about positively because you're doing this. But of course, navigating concerns and experiences as well.
Before we get to how it was publicly received and how you felt about it, I'm just curious about the actual technical process. Was this like, oh, we can have this done in 10 minutes, or did it take a lot of time to get it to the level you got it to?
It took a bunch of time, because it's not real time interactive. There's like, I can't go, oh, like right now, Jeff, you're interviewing Reid AI. That kind of interactivity is not possible. Probably one of the things that people found most creepy about it was the mirroring of human gestures. And this was part of, kind of hour one, kind of creating a corpus of Reid gestures. But then there were people behind the curtain saying, oh, when Reid is saying this, have Reid AI do the glance down gesture, or have Reid AI do the kind of, yes, I agree hand gesture. And you do that kind of stuff. And that's the human touch still. Now, that's not saying that you can't get ultimately AIs to be visually aware enough that they couldn't both A, do human gestures in the videos, and B, do them in a way that may be mirroring a particular character, Reid or somebody else in this case. But there was a whole bunch of human hackery to pull it together. Intense training, quality assurance on it, specific video with the gestures to have the repertoire, a stack of different things, some QA on, okay, so how would the Reid GPT answer these questions, and what does that look like? And I don't think we did a lot of retraining on it as much as to see which things are good and bad. And we tried to highlight, of course, what was most interesting, but even as you can tell in the dialogue, like, for example, Reid AI has a tendency to business school buzzword bingo that I do not have. And on one hand, I think that's interesting, because it's like, should I use more buzzword bingo in certain cases? And is that a language that's useful within, the world of talking about business? Or is it better that I don't go, let's leverage those synergies in order to have a win-win scenario for, blah, 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 right? It's a bunch of work. It isn't just plug in content, press play, go. But it's also, by the way, now that we have it, it becomes very easy to do, like, for example, I've been, I'm giving a speech in Perugia in about a month. And since we have it, I was like, let's give the first 4 minutes in Italian and send it to some Italian friends and see what they think. We generated in an hour or two and sent it over. And they're like,
so far, so good.
Yes. Well, they were like, oh my God, Reid speaking Italian. Do you speak Italian? No, I don't speak in Italian. This is one of the superpowers that we get from having Reid AI.
And I know it's almost impossible to predict anything given the pace. I mean, what we've seen from the Sora videos from OpenAI, for example, the pace of the evolution is like, it's insane. I hear you that we're not yet at a point where, for example, you could interview Thomas Edison. But it doesn't feel like we're that far from it. When do you think we're at a point where you could sit down and record a half-hour conversation with someone like a Thomas Edison?
I think we could do it today. I think it's a lot of work to do it today. I think it's getting easier closer as we get on. And it's one of the things that, frankly, I anticipate doing. I don't know if I should do Thomas Edison. That's an interesting question. But I think I will do a discussion like that this calendar year. Part of the whole idea of doing this is to demonstrate what's capable, not because I have access to unique technologies from Microsoft or OpenAI or something, but what's available to everybody, and to show, what's possible to do there.
So in terms of the reaction to it, I was struck by how almost down the middle it felt, with, roughly half of people being like, oh my God, this is just awesome, incredible, I can't wait to see more. And half people being like, this is terrifying AF. Like, I don't even know how to handle this. What did you take from the reaction? Did you learn anything from it? Does it inform what you think about doing going forward?
The reaction was broadly in the kind of probability curve as I expected. I maybe had a little bit more positive than I was expecting in general, mostly because the first time you encounter it, it's the, alien. And most people have that kind of reaction. And so I did have like friends of mine who were like, I had to stop watching because it just was too disconcerting. And, I think that will pass. But I'd say the more interesting comments were immediately going to some of the things that I had thought about as kind of next level of depth in kind of the journey. Like, we had to edit to being simple, and we had a whole set of things that we thought were possible to do. And like, one of them was, well, does this create a version of immortality? Like, does Reid AI live beyond Reid? Foreshadowing, one of the things we're going to use is, actually, in fact, we'll have a Reid AI going, oh my God, I'm going to be replaced by AI in a month or two because there's going to be a new, better AI than me. This is me. This is it. I'm on to the next one. To actually kind of have a different view on the timing set, because at the iteration and change. Then also, some people running with the self-reflection part of it, which is this notion of being able to talk to your digital twin. What does that bring you in an ability to self-reflect? Not just kind of look at the mirror and groom your hair, but have this kind of conversation about, how do I look and how do I listen? And I gestured at that a little bit in the podcast, because it's kind of it's like watching a video of yourself when you're training on, media training and other kinds of things, is actually watching that when you say a lot and you kind of have twitches, you're like, that's less compelling. So try to be more present for people to communicate better. But you get a much broader palette when it's a digital twin.
Yeah.
And so all of that was kind of like surprising how quickly some elements got to that.
Yeah, and I think on the balance of promise and peril of dream and doom was interesting, and I'm curious how you respond to the peril crowd, particularly on the what this shows for the potential of deepfakes. This is fully authorized. You're participating in it, et cetera. But we're seeing deepfakes nearly every day. We're in an election year in America with a pretty consequential presidential election in front of us. How do you think about balancing that opportunity and risk?
Well, if I could wave a wand and essentially, kind of say that nobody could be doing digital twins whatsoever, given the negative consequences, especially because it's a election year, I'd wave the wand, because I think that the negative immediate consequences are serious within the fact that we already have eroding trust in media and truth-telling. And the unfortunate thing is, even though I'm a very positive on the technology, even in the medium term, the short term will present many more challenges than it will create beneficial opportunities. And that's obviously the most relevant is, we have we have billions of people that are running democratic elections this calendar year, and what happens in all those. And we have antagonists of democracy. We're open sourcing the tools, which means they can do them. And so, sure, responsible actors, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, others, are all saying, hey, we'll watermark, we'll make sure that there isn't use of illicit, kind of political content on this stuff as much as we can, but we'll put a lot of energy to make it happen. When you open source tools, well, all those tools, once you open source, you might as well just, ship it right over to North Korea to say, interfere away, right? And so that's, all of that stuff is seriously concerning. If there was a way for governments to step in and regulate even a little crudely to help with the election process, I would, of course, be supportive. We are, kind of humanity first, then as part of humanity, society and the collection, and then everything else. Now, the Hollywood and jobs piece of it, I think it's, it's a funny version of Ludditism, right? So the Luddites were like, well, we like to weave the way that we were weaving before, and this loom, takes our particular method of weaving and changes it, and we don't like that because we're experts at this form of weaving. And you're like, well, when we created the loom, we created clothing for the entire middle class. It's part of what enables the middle class. It's a very, very good thing. So now we've got the steam engine of the mind and this kind of creativity. These AIs do great plot summaries. They do terrible dialogue, for example, among other things. There's lots of room for human beings to fit in and all this stuff. Yes, you need to technologically adopt the new thing as a way for it to work. But I always have sympathy for the transitions and the difficulties in the transitions. But it's a wonderful new world, and you're supposed to be creative. Figure it out. Be creative.
I want to move us to a different use of AI. In fact, a different AI technology, non-generative AI, because for as long as you've been hosting Masters of Scale, I know it's been a labor of love. But there's a labor part of it. And so could you talk a little bit about what we're experimenting with a synthetic Reid AI voice?
If I can figure out how to have tools make it a lot more efficient for me in terms of how I'm doing work and all the rest, that's a good thing. I use a phone for that. I use computers for that. I'm happy to be lazy in any context that I possibly can be. I think that's one of the origins of intelligence, frankly. But on the other hand, of course, that isn't valueless to our audience as long as it's done with care. And so what I want to is have these tools exhibit more care rather than less. So for example, if you say, well, look, why am I using this? Is, well, because I can address like a set of commentary that otherwise I don't have time for. Or I can show some lens into the future, which is helpful to our audience. Or I can go into more depth and produce some more content that hopefully some number of people will really like that I wouldn't have otherwise have time to do. And so as opposed to it's so I can care less and pay less attention, it's so that I can actually accomplish more in ways that matter for people. That's, I think, the general use of everything from Reid AI down to synthetic voices. And part of the value of synthetic voices is you can do a bunch of things where that can have superpowers that I don't. I would love to speak more languages. I am not going to spend the time in order to do it, and I'm not sure. Since I'm not particularly competent at it, it would be a lot of time. But the ability to, for example, say, hey, I've got content that might be interesting or useful, like about entrepreneurship in a number of different languages, to be able to make that more humanized into, what is Reid like when he speaks Chinese or French or Italian or Spanish, or German. All of those things are I think good things. What other things can you do with these kinds of superpowers? But they should come from a place where it's about caring more about what you're offering and how you're being choiceful to other people and what you're recommending to their attention and their participation in, and not from caring less.
I assume the more fun part of making Masters of Scale is having the conversations for you with the people you're talking to. The less fun part, perhaps, is it's a heavily produced podcast. This is not a purely sort of conversational podcast, right? You might have an hour, 90-minute conversation that gets edited down significantly, and then there's a lot of voiceover work that's done. It's a lot of work to make it sound as good as it sounds and to give the incredible production team we have the raw material to make the great episodes. So when you think about taking a synthetic AI voice and being able to approve a script or what have you, and then have it read and have it be indistinguishable for the audience, that feels like a tremendous use case here.
1,000%. And then implicit in what you were saying is also speed. Say, for example, I'm traveling for 2 weeks and there's something that's particularly important to get out. That's something you can do. There's all kinds of things. And I think the thing, that's the reason why, because of the general principle, is if what you're doing you're doing it legitimately trying to do more or valuable things for other people, and in addition to yourself. It's not saying it should be selfless, but you're legitimately keeping that in mind and legitimately doing what you're doing because of that, then I think you will be broadly on the right path. There may be some nuances in both cases where that fails, type 1, type 2, but that's a very good principle.
So the third company, the one that we've been playing with for the synthetic AI voice, is called Respeecher. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of working with them and the quality of the AI, the synthetic AI voice for you?
Respeecher is like speech-to-speech versus text-to-speech. And as part of speech-to-speech, there's an interesting variation that gives you strengths and weaknesses on this. And what it is you have a human speaking and then you transforms it to your voice. So it's much more naturally human. And so even than all of the text-to-speech stuff today, the speech-to-speech, of which last time I checked, Respeecher was one of the best or the best of those, gives you that richness. And it's one of the reasons why a bunch of the Hollywood folks have generally used Respeecher, because they're trying to get to the absolute most kind of edge of the human context for this. On the other hand, one of the things that was interesting was that what you get is the palette of what your voice actor, the person who's doing the voice that you're then modifying on top of, and that both gives you new capabilities because if the person is capable of doing some things with their voice that you're not, all of a sudden that gives you a superpower. But on the other hand, some of the text-to-speech stuff, which is just trying to replicate you, actually, funnily enough, got Reid mannerisms better. Because the voice actor is not like I'm a Reid specialist. I'm a commanding use of voice, and so I can bring that in. And so that had some weird sound effects too. And I was running the two side by side and listening to them, going, "Wow, that's interesting." And I get it because the voice actor, super competent, is doing it to the maximum degree of competence, not the maximum degree of Reidness, which has good and bad.
So the Respeecher technology will take that voice actor's voice and convert it to yours, but with emphasis or inflection that you might not naturally use.
Yes, a different speaking cadence in various ways. And so, and particularly entertaining, of course, is since Masters of Scale is how I learned to podcast and how I learned to modulate my voice, I almost have like a Masters of Scale voice now. And so, if you had a speech actor who hadn't really listened to that and was just kind of delivering, actually, in fact, the AI gets some of the cadences better because it just trained on all the Masters of Scale thing, because it trained on that, and it kind of goes, well, Reid does these weird pauses and these kinds of circumstances, so I'm going to do those weird pauses, whereas a voice actor wouldn't do that.
One of the big questions that we're wrestling with, and I know you're wrestling with, and hopefully everyone in this industry is wrestling with, is what do the listeners have a right to know?
Well, I think there's a couple of principles. One principle is, kind of call it the truth-telling / anti-deception, right? So if you are using like a digital twin of your image or voice, it should be signaled in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be like glaring red lights in the background, right? Because that might not be the experience you're looking for, but like clearly not hidden, not in like, oh, by the way, when you get to the end of all the credits, we said something, right? Something that's kind of just a little bit more like, hey, it is this. You can choose how deeply you go. It's just kind of more of a, okay, you're being forthright with me about how you're kind of producing.
Is that sort of an equivalent to almost a names have been changed to protect the innocent disclaimer at the top of a film or something like that? Is that how you think about that?
Exactly. Or even the classics of, this is based on real events, but has been fictionalized. Now, one of the things I think you guys were working on was more based also on the GPT generation of the text. And that one I think is less specific unless, it isn't ultimately, kind of gathered by human beings. Like, for example, I don't have any worries that if I do a GPT prompt in something I'm writing and it gives me a couple sentences I really like, and I put those sentences in, I don't feel like I need to quote them. I don't think I need to go, and here, this is from a GPT prompt and so forth, as long as I own them, right? And unlike, for example, like if I'm taking something that you said, then I have to attribute it to you because I don't need to like say, well, I own it, and Jeff said it, but I own it. It's like, no. Like this is part of how we go, oh, I heard this great thing from Jeff. But like GPT doesn't need that, right? So I think it's more of the question of if you basically said, well, I didn't really look at the thing that's being said to you and it's being said by my name, then you should say it, right? Because then you're like, oh, I'm not really owning what I'm saying to you. But if I, like, for example, looked over the script, even if it was GPT, and went, hey, this looks right to me. Maybe I changed a few words or anything else, but I don't have to. But it's like, looked right to it and said, yes, I own this. I'd say this.
Do you think the standard is the same for audio and for text?
I think it's the same for that. And I think it's a question of, like, do you stand by it? Right? Like, yes, this is the equivalent if I'd say it.
Okay, Reid, before we wrap, what's next? What should we expect to see from you on this?
On the Reid AI stuff, or is the general?
Yeah.
Some of the elements were there, which is, what are the ways we explore the future? So what are the places where this adds something that's helpful to how we are all seeing the future, navigating the future, steering the future? What are the places that are in depth? So I gestured at languages, but there's going to be other things too. What are the things that give us kind of new kinds of superpowers? What are the things that show us about what the world might be for this? And, I think it'll be a set of those ideas. We always welcome that. If people, send us ideas, we will, I'd say, probably monthly see some new things as this new world opens up on our horizon.
Well, as you and your digital twins drop more, we'll look forward to revisiting this with you, and may we live in interesting times.
Yes, in the good senses, not just the bad ones. But yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thanks, Reid. Great to see you.
Great to see you.